Hello friends and welcome back to Generation Pixel, and if you're new to the channel, you better get ready for some 8-bit action because you see, it's A to ZX of the spectrum and we're on to the letter E already, I know, and if you want to see these 8-bit delights, well, just wait until after the titles. Probably a good place to start with the letter E is elevator action. The title arcade port from 1983, which in fact didn't make its way onto the ZX Spectrum until much later, 1987 in fact. And of course it wasn't just a Spectrum port. This early arcade game was ported to just about every system that was out at the time. Now the game itself has a simple premise. Your character lands on top of a high-rise and he has to utilise elevators to get down to the ground. On the way down you have enemies that will be constantly coming out of doors and shooting at you at random times, or at least what seems like random times. And not only that, the elevator, well, it doesn't just go straight down. You will have to work out the pattern of the elevators, some going down 2 or 3 floors and some going down multiple floors. And of course you have to get off one elevator to get onto the next one to progress further down. And not only elevators, well, there's sets of stairwells that you sometimes have to utilise. Now the game itself is nothing special, but we are talking about an arcade game from 1983. And as such it was pretty much well loved at the time, and even by the time it made it to the ZX Spectrum and possibly other machines later on, there was a fondness for elevator action. And even now, 4 decades on, it's an easy game just to switch on and sink into. A simple time killer of a game that will amuse you for half an hour to maybe an hour, depending on just how bored you are. But it can't be all that bad if it's nearly 40 years old and people are still playing and talking about it. Once upon a time, in a distant valley cut off from civilization as we know it, there was a maze. Explorers had ventured into its depths, but none had returned to tell what lay within its walls. Now you can venture into this distant land to taste its excitement, but don't be too confident that you will return. And like our adventurer in that story, we are going way back in time for this game. We're going back to 1982, so we are talking one of the very earliest games for the ZX Spectrum, and that was Escape 3D. By New Generation Software. Now of course the 3D part of the title is mainly due to the effect that you're running about in a 3D hedge maze, and in this maze you're being chased by a number of dinosaurs. All depending on the level of difficulty that you select, that's the number of dinosaurs that will be chasing you in this game. Now let me tell you, it's not the greatest game in the world, but for 1982 it was far superior than Pac-Man on the Atari 2600, hands down. Now the point of the game was merely to get out of the maze, and to get out of the maze you had to find the axe. Now the axe was hidden somewhere in the maze, but there was no visible icon showing you where the axe was. You merely had to navigate through the maze, going up and down, left and right, trying to memorise the route you'd already taken until you were prompted that you were standing over the axe. Once you had the axe, well, you pick it up and you run to that door in the top left corner. But of course, carrying the heavy axe, well, that slowed you down, so you had to time this almost to perfection because otherwise the dinosaurs would catch up to you while carrying the axe. And of course, for replayability, the axe was never in the same place twice. And let me tell you, I played this game to death back in 1982 and 1983. Now from one game that I played to death because I absolutely loved it, to another that I played to death because I could never work out how to play it. Just to bring some people up to speed, Eddie Kidd was the UK version of Evel Knievel. Now anyone who knows me or the channel probably knows that talking about Evel Knievel is not something I do lightly. But this is not about Evel Knievel, this is about Eddie Kidd's jump challenge. Now on the surface of things, you can see from the gameplay that it seems to be fairly simple mechanics. Your character is on a bike, it starts off in a BMX, you decide how far you need to take your run up or your ride up, and then adjust your speed accordingly just to jump the obstacles that you're trying to clear. Now, no big deal, I can hear you say, because so far it seems fairly simple and straightforward. But this game is a classic example of early gaming that gives you little to no instruction. You have to work out for yourself how far you need your run up. You need to work out what effect the wind is going to have on your bike. You're going to have to work out, do you need to pull a wheelie or do you need to lean forward? You're going to need to work out exactly what speed you need to be to clear the obstacle, and absolutely every single motion in the game needs to be pixel perfect. Now, I can't tell you if I ever managed to complete this game back in the day, but I can tell you that I put so many hours into the game back in the day, well, at least it was value for money. Because like I've said in the past, a game that makes you try just one more time is often the best type of game you can play. Sticking with the theme of motorcycles, we'll move on to Enduro Racer, the Activision game from 1987. Now, as many of you will probably remember, Enduro Racer was in fact an arcade game originally, and it was ported to several different systems. One of the main selling points, however, of the ZX Spectrum port of Enduro Racer, well, it was much more like the arcade game. Granted, it didn't look like the arcade game, but it did do the best job that it could, considering the hardware that it was trying to run on. Other systems, of course, did have their own ports of Enduro Racer, but they weren't always trying to emulate the look of the arcade machine. The ZX Spectrum had the third person from behind viewpoint that the arcade machines had, where other systems went for a more isometric look where you were almost racing on a top-down perspective, which in my opinion totally changed the gameplay. But thankfully for the ZX Spectrum, the port we got was much closer to the arcade game, and as far as I'm concerned, a lot more interesting to play. Now, of course, there were plenty of racing games out there at the time, but for me, Enduro Racer was one of the best. I absolutely loved the ramps that you had to jump over on your bike, and also the way when the terrain changed from either a forest road to a desert road, you would have the animation of the sand kicking up behind your rear wheel. Little touches like that as early as 1987, well, they were just beautiful to behold. To finish off, I thought we would look at a franchise that I have a love-hate relationship with. You see, I absolutely love Star Wars, but I absolutely hate the fear of what's going to happen next. In other words, how bad is the next movie going to be, or how bad is the game going to be? And in 1985, well, I didn't quite have the same trepidation back then because there hadn't been enough time for too many mistakes. And Empire Strikes Back from Atari, well, it didn't disappoint. Now, I will point out that vector graphics weren't a thing on the ZX Spectrum. No, these are an emulation of vector graphics. But to be frankly honest, they certainly managed to do the job. And back in the day, this was so close to how the arcade looked, well, from my young point of view, that this was probably the best thing that I had ever experienced on a home microcomputer. The gameplay might not have been quite as smooth as the arcades, but there was enough pure Star Wars fun in there just to keep you hanging on. Looking back now, of course, it's very basic and maybe the frame rate isn't just what we're used to these days. But in 1985, to be able to fly a snow speeder and take down AT-ATs, or pilot that X-Wing and take out TIE fighters, and doing your part to beat the evil Empire, well, that was everything a kid back then could have hoped for. So despite how many times the Star Wars franchise has managed to, well, let's just say upset me over the past several decades, this was one of the nicely rare times where, especially in video games, well, they got it exactly right for the time. So there you go, friends, another selection of 8-bit masterpieces from the ZX Spectrum, all from the letter E. Now, if you've played any of these games, well, let me know down in the comments, because comments are what I thrive on. And if you've enjoyed this video, well, give me a thumbs up because it makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed and would like to see more content like this, or more content like, well, whatever I feel like putting out, because anyone who watches the channel knows I barely stay on one subject for more than 10 nanoseconds. But anyway, thank you again for watching, and until next time, as always, cheerio! Hello friends, and welcome back to Generation Pixel. And if you're new to the channel, you've picked a great day to pop along, because you see, you're going to be filled with a load of shite. Hello friends, and welcome back to Generation Pixel. And if you're new to the channel, well, get ready for some 8-bit bastards. Well, get ready for some 8-bit action, because today, well, how many wells do I need to dig? So there you have it, No, you don't have it. So there you have it, my friends. Another selection of 8-bit So there you have it, my friends. Another 8-bit selection of balls. That crown put me off there, Retro Bear. It really did. Because comments, that's what I'm here for. So, bollocks, wank, just... Hello, friends, and... It's not the intro, it's the outro. So there you go, friends, another selection of 8-bit masterpieces from the ZX Spectrum. Now, Granville. Oh, dearie me. Here we go.